And with respect to Minister Joly, she has no experience in doing that.
And we're working on all this front.
We got a lot of bombshell stuff happening here. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we got the Auditor General exposing that there's no paper trail for a lot of the stuff, a lot of contracts that have gone through the government, a lot of money. Where's the accountability? There is none. We've also got Melanie Joly making a fool of herself on CBC, first talking in circles to David Cochrane, conservative James Moore in the back, listening to it and then destroys her afterwards, completely obliterates her and just exposes her for who she is. A minister in a position with no idea of what she's doing. And we've got Mark Carney asked about Alberta separation. He's absolutely gobsmacked, doesn't know what to say. Let's jump into this. This one coming from the Western Standard. It says Metro Vancouver residents ordered to register indoor wood burning appliances. Yeah, Vancouver is becoming pretty dumb pretty quick. And if you don't, there could be fines of up to $500. Come on. As it says here, they want to ensuring visible emissions are only produced for 20 minutes within 4-hour period, only burning clean seasonal wood, not tossed garbage into the flames. Common sense in Vancouver is becoming a scarce thing. Next up, we got Mark Carney making word salad when asked about Alberta referendum and separation. Clearly nervous. He doesn't like this question.
Secondly, I'd like to turn to talk of making Canada an energy superpower.
Yeah.
Danielle Smith has said, there could be a referendum next year, and the legislation around that is 170,000 people can put that on the ballot. Brian Mulroney once perhaps referred to rolling the dice with the future of Canada. Is it appropriate for that few people to put the fate of a G7 nation in the balance?
Well, first off, 170,000 people wouldn't be putting the country at risk. It would be the people voting in Alberta to separate. I talked to my own mother who's considering it. I wouldn't expect that at all, but clearly there's a lot of support for people wanting to separate in Alberta. If my own mother is thinking about it, as Carney's face shows, they better be worried.
I see what you're trying to do, the province of Alberta, provinces make determinations on the rules governing referenda, voter plebiscites, other factors, and they can make determination on how they come into force. Determinations on broader issues of referenda on a federal level, including supported by Supreme Court decisions, are governed by the Clarity. I will refer to the Clarity Act. But look, what we're interested in, what Canada's new government is interested in, what Parliament, I think most parliamentarians are interested in, is building this country, not breaking it apart. It's working together, working with Indigenous peoples, working with
This is a word salad, Mark. You don't want to answer the question. You're terrified.
This is working with labor, working with business. We have many, we have this threat, this realizing from the US that regardless of what outcome we get, it matters what agreement we get, but it's changing the world of trade. It is changing the outlook for the global economy in not just immediate, but the medium term. We have to take more responsibility ourselves to move forward, which is what we're doing with the One Canadian Economy Act and what's underneath it, which very much includes, and I'll finish on this, very much includes cooperation with the province of Alberta, the province of Saskatchewan, province of British Columbia, all the provinces and territories, Indigenous people, for these nation-building projects. And we're having constructive, I would say, very constructive discussions with Premier.
Look at him checking with Melanie Joly. She's off camera here, but
I would say a very constructive discussion.
Are they constructive? Let me know. Are they constructive? I'm not paying attention.
With Premier Smith and stakeholders in Alberta specifically, and we intend to convert those to actual projects, investment, jobs, and a brighter future for the country.
Carney's a bonehead. He doesn't know what's going on, and he's terrified. And I'm glad this Alberta separation movement is growing because it's forcing these guys to actually do what's right for once. For once in Canada. The West has been neglected for years and years. We're at a point where we can actually get some stuff done, and then we got David Eby blocking the West Coast. By the way, send him an email. Tell him how you feel. He's a barefaced liar. So basically nothing. He never says what the projects are. I counted 19 ums and ahs in that clip. Danielle Smith has been playing this so smart. Making it easier for this movement to grow forces Carney's hand to actually support Alberta for once. Next up, we got Francois Philippe Champagne here. Mr. Bench stating, did Liberals admit to borrow $95 billion so Canada can fight US on tariffs? Or did I completely interpret this wrong?
Well, why did you set up a $95 billion borrowing authority for geopolitical risk if we're going to get a deal with the US?
Well, listen, we've always been clear since day one that we want to have no tariffs and that we're fighting for Canadian workers, the industry, and at the same time building our country. So we would continue, and we're continuing. I mean, you've seen it. We just had the G7. Prime Minister was there with the President. The Minister LeBlanc's been very active. We're very, very engaged to defend Canadian interests.
But 95 billion is a lot of money to borrow, right?
Well, listen, you know, we have a number of tools in the toolbox. You know, what Canadians expected us when we started that was to fight for them, but at the same time be prudent when it comes to looking at what we might be able to do to support industry. You've seen that.
Is one of those tools telling Donald Trump that the relationship is over, and then when Mark Carney meets him, he's praising him? Is that one of the tools?
We're now affected by unfair steel and aluminum tariffs, so we've been there to fight. We've been there to support the industry, the workers, and at the same time favor also domestic consumption of what we produce in Canada.
Next up, we got Melanie Joly talking herself in circles, trying to convince us she's doing work when she's really not doing anything, and she's outclassed, and James Moore sees it. James Moore absolutely destroys her. Listen to this.
Let's start with the 30-day timeline before retaliation. What's your level of optimism that something will get done in the next 30 days or by the 16th of July?
But I think, you know, we have to make sure that we're continuing to negotiate, but we're ready also as we know, we're in a trade war. We know that the economy is the battlefield, and they're front lines right now. And I know you want to
just talking empty platitudes over and over.
Talk about that, but the front lines are steel, aluminum, and auto.
Right. But when, you know, the U.S. ambassador, or the ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman and Dominic LeBlanc came out of the meetings at the G7 saying, we felt an acceleration. We've been told to accelerate it. When you set a deadline, either enough is enough and it's time to draw a line in the sand, or you think you can get something done by then, or both. How do you view it?
I'll let the folks in charge of the negotiation do their work. I think that indeed, as mentioned, we now have a clearer process. And at the same time, we're the country that has imposed the most counter tariffs. We're the country that is the biggest client of the US. Of course, we want to protect these jobs. Of course, we want to make sure that we have an industry. And my job as industry minister is to fight for these jobs and to fight for these plants. And that's what I'll do. I've been on the phone a lot over the past few days to make sure that we land at a good place. I understand that there's still concerns, and we'll be in solution mode.
And I get the strategy there because, you know, the White House has unleashed a wave of protectionism around the world that industries are forced to just adapt to.
Yeah.
But this is going to take some time, right? So, like, what's the timeline you see for that sort of pivot? You know, where Canadian steel can be reoriented towards a defense supply chain that we're kind of just starting to build as a country, right? This is not the sort of thing, I mentioned the 30-day time frame. I know that's for countermeasures, but that 30 days at 50% tariffs for these companies is going to be rough.
Well,
the transition is going to take months, years.
That's why we have a One Canadian Economy bill. That's why we want to, you know, people have been asking why this urgency of passing through this legislation. There is urgency. People will potentially be losing their jobs. So
if there's such urgency, why would they put draconian stuff in that bill that they know the Conservatives, the Bloc, and the NDP are going to oppose? That's what they've done. On top of that, if there's such urgency, why are they going to take 2 months off in the summer? Why aren't they sitting throughout the entire summer? Her statements don't line up. Their actions don't line up. They clearly don't care that much. Otherwise, they would work through the summer.
So we're fighting every day to make sure that we keep these plants open. It's the future of jobs in the trade that is right now not only at risk, but actually could be potentially a great opportunity because we'll have so many different major infrastructure projects. But I think we should all bear in mind that the mindset of trade in the world has changed. And so we need to have a Build in Canada plan. And that's what this government is doing.
But it does seem the prices will rise as a result of this because security and self-sufficiency often comes at a cost. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing.
That is why we're cutting taxes. And that is why that was our first bill, to make sure that we can continue to have this social safety net with pharmacare, with dental care, with childcare. But at the same time, we know that things are costing too much. It's been tough. And so that's why we're cutting taxes, and we're working on all these fronts.
Okay, I've gone over time. Industry Minister Melanie Joly, appreciate you. Thanks for coming.
She is so out of her element here. She has no idea what she's doing. First off, pharmacare is just diabetes. The dental plan is not available to everyone. Also, the child care plan, not fair, not available to everyone. It's like winning the lottery to get in on that. Their tax cut is pitiful, and she has no idea what she's doing in this role. In contrast here to Melanie Joly's word salad, listen to this. James Moore, conservative, absolutely destroys her and humiliates her. Jumping into the CBC clip, they're talking about Donald Trump's strategy versus Mark Carney's strategy.
We're saying it maybe in a more, the Canadians are saying it in a better packaged way, in a more graceful way, but it is very much mirroring the same type of strategy that we saw coming out of Washington, and I think that's of note. We'll see how it works.
Well, hopefully this one's a little bit more strategic and consistent than what we saw. I can't imagine Mark Carney with a big prop chart going through things like Trump did, but let's hope. But, James, I wonder, talking to Melanie Joly, and you look at how they're talking about restructuring sort of the domestic market for steel and aluminum into defense procurement, maybe, creating components specifically for the Canadian auto sector. That, I understand the necessity of that, but that is then putting higher labor cost inputs into those particular sectors. It seems like it is going to make things more expensive. That's not a criticism. That's just, it seems like the natural outcome of where this reorientation of these industries is going to lead.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a mixed economy, and there are times when the government has to intervene and put in some liquidity and to counterbalance measures that are unfair and frankly illegal from the United States when it comes to trade. But my free market, free enterprise, hairs in my neck stood up a little bit listening to Minister Joly's conversation with you. And Frank, and I don't mean this to be a cheap shot in any way, but frankly, the longer she talked, the more confused I got. The longer she explained, the more she needed to sort of re-explain. It wasn't clear. It wasn't concise. And I think we get into the dangerous ground here of government trying to be busy for the sake of being busy so they can say that they're being busy so that we're all reassured that they're being busy. And you get into the point where the medicine can kill the patient when you try to sort of overly inject government interventions into these things. Workers need support. The businesses need market access. And in the long term, we need stability in terms of what the nature of our market access relationship is with the United States. Those are kind of the three main components. Trying to sort of gerrymander the supply chain and guarantee outcomes and percentages and inputs, the government is not good at that. And with respect to Minister Joly, she has no experience in doing that. The government doesn't have experience in doing that. That is not their strong hand. Their responsibility is to open up markets, provide as much certainty as they can in the long term, and support workers who are unfairly being punished because of trade actions by the United States. Stick to those three things and do those things well, and that'll get us through a lot of this storm.
Wow, James Moore just beyond humiliated Melanie Joly, just basically called her useless in her job. Every time she speaks, it's like that. She just speaks for the sake of speaking to try to convince us that she's doing work. She's saying she's doing work, so she must be doing work, she's doing work, but really she's doing nothing. Next up, we've got Auditor General Karen Hogan discusses how in one contract she reviewed, she was unable to find timesheets detailing work completed for 24 of 25 resources used. As in, they only filed one timesheet for 25 resources. Shocking mismanagement of public funds.
They are sidestepping them, and that's why I recommend the government needs to take a step back and look at the rules on procurement to improve the processes, the entire process. I understand, Ms. Hogan, it's incredible that we're at this state after 10 years. It's just applying the rules. And we're not talking about science here or rocket science, as we say in English. We're talking about basic healthy management of public funds. Canadian families know how to manage their budgets, but the government doesn't. So there's no justification, no management, no assessment of skills, no demonstration of call for tenders, bids that are 80% higher than they should be. These are basic things. How is it that after 10 years of this government, they are still not able to follow the basic rules to ensure that taxpayers' money is properly managed? Thank you for the summary. I am concerned when 94% of contracts require time sheets that to ensure that the work was properly carried out, where a public servant did not ask for time sheets. We found a contract where there were 25 resources and the department could only provide us with a timesheet for one of them. And that is why I said that I have difficulty saying they received value for their money, but when we talk about public servants, they are confident that the services were provided. So
no, somebody needs to go to jail. That's what has to happen here. If we're talking about Arrive scam, well, is it Darren Anthony, Christian Firth, both of them go to jail? Is it Min Doan, the guy whose emails mysteriously deleted once this started blowing up? Then he claimed he had mental health problems. Is he going to jail? Is it Francois Philippe Champagne, higher up the list, Minister of Science, Technology, Innovation, all that? Is he going to jail? Someone has to go to jail for money being lost. And in this case, someone in this pipeline has to go to jail. If they're missing records of 24 out of 25, clearly someone is stealing money, and stealing money should equal 10 years in jail. Just make it 1 year in jail for every $1,000 stolen. $100,000, you're in jail for 100 years.
It's a return back to basics for the elements needed to demonstrate prudent use of public funds. And these can't be done to junior players. These are high senior ministers, and unfortunately 4 of them did not do their homework, and these are still playing an important role. There is someone who's the chief of staff. We're talking about someone, the minister responsible for international trade between Canada and the United States, the person who is currently the Minister of Foreign Affairs. How is it that 4 ministers who are currently being rewarded by this government, they close their eyes on this laxity about taxpayers' money?
If they put in the system I just said, $1,000 goes missing, that's 1 year in jail, you wouldn't see a single problem ever again in the government. No one wants to go to jail for 10 years for $10,000 that disappears. It wouldn't be worth the risk anymore. It's unbelievable that in our government, if money gets stolen, it's just called corruption, and everyone just kind of shrugs like, well, it's a little bit of corruption. Money goes missing. If I were to go into a bank and steal it, I would go to jail. That's how this works. Why is our government system so broken where politicians can steal our money and they don't go to jail?
The question of where the ministers were placed, which departments they were in, is not an issue that I would verify. My mandate looks at the decisions of ministers, and not the decisions of ministers, but rather the actions of the public service. And as I mentioned previously, I would not expect a minister to be involved in the daily management of procurement, but I would expect that the department give a briefing on their broad processes within the department tied to procurement, because this is taxpayers' money, and I would expect a better accountability by the public service. Thank you very much.
That's not good enough. Saying we need to do better isn't good enough. Someone actually has to go to prison and has to pay the consequences for screwing us over, because this is our money. Arrest them all, everyone who mismanaged funds, and needs to defend why they're so negligent, why they didn't follow proper procurement. Yeah, exactly. Put them all in jail. Put all of them in jail for 1 year, and whoever is at the top of the list gets 10, 20, 15 years. It's time to start punishing these fools. Typical liberal. We've been seeing this over and over for the last decade. Nothing ever changed. You cannot have a corrupt liberal government policing its own self.